Hello class, Bob Greedy here. In this video I'm going to walk you through some of my thoughts from chapters 4 and 5, highlighting some of the areas I think are of particular interest. And here we go. So chapter 4 discusses measurement. So I want you asking the question, why do you measure anything? And you've probably heard if we can't measure it, we can't manage it, or if we can't measure it, we can't improve it. So think about what happens when you set a goal for yourself. Sorry, I'm fiddling with my keyboard there. When you set a goal and it's measurable, and then you start tracking your progress towards achievement of that goal, you're motivated. You're motivated in part because you're aware of whether or not you're getting there, whether or not you're reaching your goal. So the point of measurement, in part, is motivation, but in part it's also giving us an awareness of where we are relative to where we ought to be. A big part of IT in management is providing that awareness. So if I manage salespeople, I need data every week that tells me, or every day, where we are relative to our sales goal. I need awareness of our progress or our lack thereof. Uh, Chapter 4 goes over specific IT metrics, so metrics with respect to technology itself. So while IT provides us data that helps us measure and assess situations, in this chapter we're talking about how do we assess the IT itself. How do we know if we're getting the bang for the buck when we spend money or resources on technology? So here's some learning outcomes from this chapter. We're going to compare IT metrics and effectiveness metrics. So I'm sorry, efficiency metrics versus effectiveness metrics. In this context, efficiency means that the technology is doing what the technology is supposed to do. And by that I mean, so if you have a web server, for example, if the web server is efficient, then it can handle a lot of traffic. So Yahoo.com, of course, they have many servers, but those servers can handle millions of hits to their website. So you'd say that technology is working efficiently. However, if you had a website that no one went to because it wasn't interesting or nobody cared about the content or for whatever reason, you'd say that website is not very effective. So effectiveness speaks to the end game. Are we accomplishing some purpose? So effectiveness metrics include things like profitability or return on uh, investment or usability, this type of thing. Where efficiency is more about, is the technology working properly? So then we'll get into some specific examples of each of these, efficiency and effectiveness, within specific domains. Some of the systems we've already talked about from last week, including customer relationship management systems, enterprise resource planning systems, supply chain. We'll talk about how do you measure whether or not those systems are performing uh, as they should. So we'll look at specific effectiveness metrics, specific efficiency IT metrics, and explain their importance along the way. So at this point, this slide's a bit redundant. The efficiency IT metric measures the performance of the IT system itself. So this will make sense as we look at specifics. I'm also going to show you some efficiency metrics from the perspective of a website slash product that I have. We'll look at those in just a minute, and we'll talk about these efficiency and effectiveness topics within that context. So hopefully that'll make things a bit more interesting and memorable. So whenever we do take the time to measure something, the other thing we have to do is we have to set some kind of a standard or a goal. Your text calls this the benchmark. Benchmarking is something, to me, is synonymous with setting a goal, but it involves looking to the industry, for example, to find out who has accomplished best practices. In other words, what should we aim for? Um, okay, so let's talk about some of these. Throughput, how much data can move through a system within a particular point in time. So we have a website called Live Class Tech. I have another one called Join Prof, but these are audience response systems. Audience response system is a way to hear from your audience in a live environment. So students, for example, can ask a question by typing them in on their smartphone, and then I'll receive the question on my tablet. I'll show you that in just a minute. But for our business to work, our server has to handle throughput. In other words, if I'm speaking to a class of 50 and 1,000 other people are speaking to classes of 50 simultaneously, then we have tens of thousands of users on that server at the same time. So throughput becomes critical. Otherwise, the system freezes up, and an audience response system is kind of useless. Transaction speed, the amount of time a system takes to perform a transaction. We hear the word transaction, we tend to think about a monetary exchange for a product or service. Here, the transaction refers to the system actually performing some action. So when a user, in our example, hits submit, and you can call that a transaction. They've submitted some content. How long does that take? System availability is perhaps self-defining. If we have a server, it's a great example, and it goes down, then of course it's not available. So when you enter into a contract with a company like GoGrid, is the one we use, contractually they'll agree that their server that you lease, which is just a computer that you can use remotely, uh, they agree that the system will be available 99.99. So they're basically agreeing contractually that we will make sure this server stays up and running, and if it doesn't, then there are implications contractually. Information accuracy, self-explanatory. Web traffic, um, again, we're measuring how much content a website can dole out, essentially how much a server can handle. Um, and we'll look at some of those here in just a second as well. Response time, when I interact with a website, how long does it take for the website to respond, or the database to return a query result? These are examples. What I want to do now is I want to jump out of this, and we want to look at some of these measures from a real example here. So I'm going to open a browser, and I've got a couple of things open here. So the first site I have open, you see, is a Google Analytics page, and this is for a site we have called Live Class Tech. This is an audience response system that, again, it runs on a web server. So we lease a computer. I think it's in California somewhere, and our audience response system is housed, if you will, exists, if you will, functions from a server that we lease. And this is the activity of that server available through Google Analytics. So you can see, for example, on Thursday, October 2nd, we had 145 hits to that server. So 145 people came and logged in and used the server. Now, it's a classroom response system, and primarily it's used at UC Irvine, a college out in California that really likes it. And you'll notice that there's not a lot going on Saturday and Sunday. Of course, that's because they're not teaching classes. Looks like it's going to peak every week around Wednesday. There must be several classes that I'll use at that particular day. So you can see where your loads are and how much traffic you're generating and how much your server is handling. And then you can see it's broken down a bit more. Again, this is the area of measurement and metrics, and we want to glean some useful info from this. So here I have some info. The average person's on there for just a minute, which would make sense for an audience response system. Down here you can even pull some pretty interesting info from this. If you'll notice, I can break things down by browser. So if I click that, I can tell that about 2,000 of the 2,700 or so clicks were from the Safari browser. It tells me we probably have quite a few Apple users in this group. Perhaps they're using their their smartphone, their iPhone rather. The operating system, yeah, this confirms it right there. That's Apple's operating system. You have a few Windows users, etc. So you can really glean a lot by looking at the data, and then this can help you, for example, optimize your content for the specific types of browsers and audience response systems that you're utilizing. So if you're using your web site to sell your product, for example, you need this type of data to um, configure your content and know who your customers are. So if I have a desktop website, meaning all of the content is made for a screen that's 13 inches wide, um, then that may not look too good on a smartphone. And I learned from looking at these analytics that I need to reconfigure my content so that it looks good on a smartphone. By the way, more browsing happens on a phone these days than on a desktop, which is not surprising to anyone. However, it's been that way for several years. And several years ago, that was kind of a surprising fact. Okay, let's look at and give an example to um, some of the other measures. So again, we're an audience response system, and the screen you see here is what the professor would look at if the if the professor asked the students for questions or ideas. So as a student, the student's going to go to joinprof.com and they're going to ask a question. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to demonstrate response time of a website, something we're real interested in. So I'm going to type the word test. Now I'm on my smartphone acting as a student over here, and I'm going to hit provide input, and as soon as I do, we're going to count. We're going to see how many seconds it takes for that to appear on the professor's screen. So I'm hitting it now. So about a second, roughly a second. So that's great. That's what we want. If that would have been 10 seconds, 20 seconds, then an audience response system suddenly becomes not very effective. So I can do similar things. I can launch a poll as a professor, and now I can look at the student machine, and boom, it just now appeared. So there was about a second delay between when the professor pushed a quiz to the students and when the students responded. So these are examples of the metrics we were looking at and discussing in chapter 4 here. Okay, let me get back to this. Okay, so transaction speed, the amount of time it takes to perform a transaction. That's a critical component in our audience response system. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Here's some effectiveness metrics. It's important that you realize that it's hard to achieve effectiveness, an ultimate goal, without efficiency. You see that in our example, we're not very effective if the efficiency isn't there. If it takes 10, 20 seconds for a student question to be visible by the professor, that's not good. That's not going to result in improved learning environment. So that's not effective. So let's look at some of these usability. We've all interacted with websites, maybe a shopping cart. You're trying to do a transaction and it takes longer than it should. It's not very usable, so that results in fewer sales or abandoned shopping carts or just less revenues ultimately. Customer satisfaction. We've all interacted with technology and just thought, well, that was way too complicated. There's technology that I like to talk about called TurboTax. It's a really simple way to do your taxes, in my opinion. And that's a very satisfying experience, in part because it's so simple, in part because it works properly. So again, you can't have effectiveness without the efficiency. Conversion rate. So conversion here is not speaking to a religion or something. It's speaking to converting an individual from a non-paying customer to a paying customer. So for example, you can spend money and drive traffic to your website. You can do this a number of ways. You can do this through social media. So I can post a Facebook ad and drive traffic to my website. I can do this through search engine optimization, where I configure my website so that I improve where I stand in the Google search results. And I can buy ads through something like Google AdWords so that when someone searches for my product, I show up on the front page. I can buy those ads, maybe $1 a click. that's a ballpark. You can spend a lot more, but you can often buy clicks, meaning someone sees your ad, clicks the ad, and winds up on your website for $1. So conversion rate would be, of those that click on and show up on your website, how many actually sign up for your product? So that's going to be pretty critical. For example, if my conversion rate is 1% and I'm spending $1 on every click, what does it cost me to convert a customer? I'm going to say that again, and email me. Whoever emails me with the answer, I'll add a couple points on top of your test score. So again, the question is this: if I convert 1% of my clicks, and each click costs me $1, what's it costing me to acquire a new customer? Customer acquisition cost. That's your question. Email me with the answer. The first one to email me with the answer. Again, I'll add, let's say, 3 points to your midterm score. Okay, financial are just what they sound like. Technology is an expenditure. It sucks resources just like any other type of project you would do in an organization. So we want to look at things like the return on investment of those dollars that go into technology. We want to look at things like break-even point in terms of usage and time as well. So we want to know what we're getting for our money. We also talk about in this chapter security and how that kind of can slow things down a little bit. But I wanted to specifically talk about SSL, or secure socket layers, and give you a real quick, simple example of what happens with that. You've noticed in your browser, let's find a browser, you'll notice this HTTPS oftentimes. If you're doing a transaction online, you'll see this padlock and you'll see the S. This implies that there's a secure socket layer involved, and essentially that's encryption, so that any content that you share with this server or through this website is encrypted while that data travels along the internet. So if I wanted to send you, this is a silly example, but it kind of explains. Let's say I wanted to send you the number 9, but I didn't want anybody to see the number 9 if it was intercepted on the internet. So what I might do is I might tell you, I might send you the number 80, and then I would tell you that here's the secret. What you're going to do is you're going to add 1 to that and then divide by 9, and then that's the real number I wanted to send you. So what we do is we encrypt, and by encryption we mean we simply scramble and then unscramble content while it's we scramble it obviously while it's on the internet, and then it's unscrambled at where it's received. So that if that data is intercepted, all that's intercepted is jargon because it's yet to be unscrambled. Okay. So next time you do a transaction, make sure you buy something online. Make sure you've got this lockup here and the S here. That implies a secure socket layer. Okay. I'm guessing some of you knew that, I bet. Let's see. Now, we're going to look at specific metrics or strategic initiatives. So we talked in another chapter about supply chain management, about customer relationship management, about business process reengineering, and about ERP. Now let's look at some measures of success for those specific technology areas. So website metrics. So we're talking here specifically about, let's say, e-commerce. So I sell products through a website. Maybe I'm bestbuy.com. Maybe I'm bananarepublic.com. Any retailer nowadays will probably have a website presence where you can buy their product there. So abandoned registrations is just what it sounds like. I had a student recently that abandoned a purchase. They had They were about to purchase a lot of athletic gear for their kids. They had a bunch of kids, and they were buying, let's say, soccer outfits. And they got sidetracked. They had to leave that registration or abandoned shopping cart. I misspoke here. They left the shopping cart. They actually got an email from the company later that day that explained that we noticed you abandoned your shopping cart. If you'll complete your transaction, we'll give you 15-20% off. I forget what it was, but she did. She went back and she completed the transaction, received a promotion. And I thought that was pretty aggressive, pretty proactive on the part of the retailer to do it that way. But if we notice a lot of these things, because we're measuring it, if we notice that 4 out of 5 people abandon their shopping cart, we'd probably say to ourselves that our process for taking a customer's money might be burdensome. Maybe we could make that easier and improve and by that I mean lower the number of abandoned shopping carts. Okay, a lot of these are kind of obvious. A click-through rate is for every, let's say, 1,000 people that see a banner ad, how many people actually click on it. I've experienced this. I've run ads through Google AdWords, through Facebook, or the audience response system, and I notice when I put a funny picture of a funny guy who looks confused, I get a higher conversion rate. So the same number of people see it, but more people click on it. So again, you'd want to know your conversion rate so you know what images, what content generate interest from those folks who are viewing your ads. Okay. Okay, I'm going to keep going here. I won't read through each and every one of these. I want to hit some of the ones that may be less obvious. Now, with respect to supply chain management, one goal, you could kind of sum it up with one goal, and that's this. We want supply to equal demand. Okay? We want supply to equal demand. So in other words, I want to have just what my customer needs just when they need it. If I have more than they need, then that's inventory and it's expensive. If I have less than they need, then I've lost an opportunity to sell. Or if it's a B2B transaction, a business-to-business transaction, and I don't have what they need, then I've slowed down a production process, possibly. Okay, so the idea with supply chain is to match supply to demand when it's demanded. So now, with that in mind, let's think about these metrics. Back order implies that I can't meet demand, doesn't it? If I have a product, I've already sold it, but I don't have it, I'm not meeting demand as well as I could. It sounds like a good problem to have, but nonetheless, it's a problem. Customer ordered promise cycle time versus customer order actual cycle time. So if a customer orders, let's say, a custom type product, and I say I can get that to you within 3 weeks, and we actually get it to them within 2 weeks, then those are those two metrics there. Inventory replenishment cycle time. How long does it take me to, once depleted, replenish an inventory? And then kind of the most common one you'll hear is turnover. Turnover is, let's say, annual revenues relative to average inventory. Again, typically turnover is expressed as annual revenues relative to average inventory. So, for example, if Bob Howard Auto Mall sells $100 million worth of cars in a year, and they have 10 million cars on average on their lots, then turnover would be 10. 100 million in sales over 10 million in inventory. Okay. Of course, you want turnover to be higher, higher, higher. I won't run through all of these, but recall that CRM, we talked about this before. CRM, our goal is to extract value from our customer relationships, both in the short term and the long term, which involves keeping our customers loyal over time as we sell them more and more products. Okay. With that, I'm going to wrap up Chapter 4. I've got another video coming for Chapter 5, and look for that shortly.